I like to start off by being difficult and have a different computer and a different presentation format. I'm a clinical psychologist, and in my private practice, I work a lot with boys and men and people involved in sports. And when I was in my training, I really wasn't interested in the psychological lives of boys all that much, because as a psychologist, I was learning how to talk with people about their problems. And I found that girls and women were just so much easier to work with because they would actually talk. So I'd get these boys into my office, and I found them to be so much more frustrating because when asked about their feelings, they'd say, "I don't know," or they would say nothing at all. But I began to realize that boys often speak to us in a different language. Often they speak through movement, and too often they speak to us only in anger and frustration because we have all been taught to remain stoic, expressing vulnerability as a last resort. And really that's what I'm here to talk about to you tonight very quickly, and hopefully we can begin to change. So let's take a look at the outline. Here's what I hope that we're able to cover tonight. Tell you a little bit about the world of boys, and then also what boys need to become healthy men. Now, the world of boys is different from your world, and it's different from the world of girls. And I realize here that I'm just generalizing wildly. So if it doesn't exactly strike you to be true of the boys in your lives, or of you personally, allow that it's generally true. So let's dive in. Erik Erikson talked about different tasks for each life stage, and I think that's a really interesting and important way of thinking about it. And so when I think about middle school years and going into junior high, there's this push towards establishing some type of competence. So the job of a kid in junior high and middle school is to have a sense of competence at something. As one of my supervisors used to say, every boy needs a fastball. And for some boys, that's a fastball. But for other boys, it's poetry. That they have to find some way that they can be an expert on something. This is why kids at this age collect a lot of things, or they tend to know a lot of things. I talk about the boy who phenomenon. That they want to be the boy who knows a lot about baseball, or the boy who can tell you, I was the boy who knew a lot about Star Trek, which tells you about my junior high life. Because that's the beginning of navigating social interactions and the advent of puberty. And the second and most important thing they need to do is to begin the process of separation from parents, especially. You guys are great. The boys are in the process of growing into the world of men, which also means that they need to push against mom and what they begin to see as being the domain of the feminine. And so here's the task that they need to accomplish. And so what are the tools that they're working with on those tasks? Relative to girls, boys develop language later. And research is clear that they're more physically revved up than girls are. And really, apart from those two things, there's not a whole lot that's statistically reliably different between the two. Like girls, boys experience very strong emotions. And some research even suggests that boys and men experience emotions more strongly than girls and women do. But by age 8, we see that boys are less able to handle those feelings. Psychologist Michael Thompson refers to this as emotional literacy. That we just don't teach boys to read feelings or to express feelings in the same way that we do for girls. So here we have a situation where a boy has a developmental task of separating from mom, and he begins to see that emotions are feminine and weak. And he begins to assume that women are weak because they are the keepers of feelings other than angry and frustrated. And so all of this then takes place in the context of a very different media landscape than I experienced as a boy. Images of what it means to be a man are these sort of hyper-masculine tough guys. And you see that Batman found steroids since 1950-something. So hyper-masculine tough guys who solve all their problems with their fists, or by bragging, or by threatening, like North Korea. Or there's ineffective dumb guys who get into goofy predicaments because they're so immature. Now, it's true that boys and men have a lot more power than girls and women. And more power and more privilege that is mishandled due to a lack of emotional sensitivity leads to abuse. Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., Donald Trump, and hundreds of other men have been accused of serious wrongdoing in recent months. And the Me Too movement is really important, and we need to hear women's voices. This abuse has to stop. And we also need to think about what these messages mean to young boys. And we hope that they're learning the integrity of women's bodies and how they need to treat women. But I worry that they're also learning that being a boy or a man is a bad thing. And I hear these sorts of things in my practice all the time. I hear boys disparaging boys and men, that it's bad to be a boy or a man. And so if your menu of images from manhood include being a powerless doofus, or a powerful sexual predator, or a roided up superhero, it's really hard to pick. And I don't have time in all this to discuss the impact of porn and violent video games, but those are some really gnarly actors here too. So, where can that lead us? Relative to girls, boys are less likely to go to college. They're 3 times more likely to be in special education programs. They're more likely to get referred to school psychologists. They're more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to be involved in the juvenile justice system. They're more likely to commit violent crimes. They're more likely to develop drug and alcohol problems. And they're more likely to die by suicide. Now, I know that's all pretty dire, but it's all really true. And it's also true that most boys are doing just fine. But I think we can do better than this. So what is it that boys need to become healthy men? I think the most important thing that boys need is compassion. Boys need to learn compassion for themselves, above all else, compassion. That we indoctrinate boys into a world of power and privilege, which can lead to really bad behavior. But it also leads to shame, self-doubt, and an inability to connect with other people. If we teach compassion, so many other things will fall into line. Boys need men. Boys need men that they can look up to and emulate. Boys need men who will demonstrate compassion, love, expression, responsibility, and strength. Boys with involved fathers are more likely to go to college, less likely to commit crimes, and more empathetic and caring. Although boys tend to identify their fathers as being the person with whom they are least likely to talk about their feelings, that doesn't matter, because the value is in the role modeling. Fathers, coaches, grandfathers, therapists, and teachers are all vital to boys trying to figure out the world of manhood. Boys need physical activity, not necessarily organized sports, which I think can be really bad for boys, but physical engagement and enjoyment, because good coaches can be a life changer. Boys need emotional literacy, that we need to be the voice of their emotions and give voice to the emotions of other people. And I do this in my therapy work with boys all the time. I would have felt really scared if that had happened to me. That's a really terrible and hard situation. I don't make them own those feelings. I give them those feelings. Gosh, I feel sad when you tell me that. That if we don't personalize feelings, it makes it easier for boys to talk about situations, experiences, and that of other people. We can all model that language with boys. Finally, boys need freedom to talk about their experiences, and we can help them model the language. They need constructive ways to express their frustration, and they need to not feel forgotten or vilified, because the world is hard and confusing enough right now for all of them.